Our reflective reading this morning is a poem by John O'Donohue, who was a gifted poet and priest and died much younger than I, for one, would have hoped. In 2008, he was quite young. For one who is exhausted, a blessing. When the rhythm of the heart becomes hectic, time takes the strain until it breaks. Then all the unattended stress falls in on the mind like an endless increasing weight. The light in the mind grows dim. Things you could take in stride before now become laborsome efforts of will. Weariness invades your spirit. Gravity begins failing inside you, falling deeply, dragging every bone. The tide you never valued goes out, and you are marooned on unsure ground. Something within you has closed down, and you cannot push yourself back to life. You have been forced to enter empty time. The desire that drove you has relinquished. There is nothing else to do now but rest. And patiently, you learn to receive the self you have forsaken in the race of days. At first, your thinking will darken and sadness take over like listless weather, and the flow of heretofore unwept tears will frighten you. You have traveled too fast over uneven ground, but now your soul comes to take you back. Take refuge in your senses, open up to all the small miracles you rushed through. Become inclined to watch the way of rain when it falls slow and free. Imitate the habit of twilight, taking time to open the well of color that fostered the brightness of day. Draw alongside the silence of stone until its calmness can claim you. Be excessively gentle with yourself. Stay clear of those vexed in spirit and learn to linger around someone of ease who feels somehow at even now, in even this time, who feels they have all the time in the world. Gradually, this way, you will return to yourself, having learned a new respect for your heart and the joy that dwells far within slow time. Good morning again. Since about 2015, I have had a sort of byword or motto, which is persistent gentleness and gentle persistence. And we hear from John O'Donohue about being excessively gentle with ourselves. And I love that he says that, except for the excessively part, because it suggests that other people are looking at you saying, why are you being so gentle? That's excessive, right? Excessive gentleness. So I talk about persistent gentleness. And persistent gentleness is not the quote unquote self-care of the privileged, where we all get pedicures and go on retreat all the time and remove ourselves from the troubles of the world. That is not what I'm talking about. Gentleness reminds us that we love ourselves, but not only ourselves. And persistent gentleness reminds us that we love others, but not only others. Gentleness allows us to be kind, which, by the way, is not the same thing as being nice, right? Being nice is a veneer. And while this isn't entirely true, those of us who identify as women are often really pushed to be nice at our own expense and the expense of those we love. Because sometimes kindness is not nice. I'll just leave you with that little bit there. Kindness tells the truth, and gentleness can tell the truth too. Persistent gentleness tells the truth even more often. Ooh, my apologies. Am I safe? No? I'm not on at all now. Can you hear me? Sorry. Oh. So gentleness is also not laziness. My wife has banned the word lazy and the word laziness or lazily, banned those words from our household. Why? The reason is that lazy is a characterization, right? Saying that someone is lazy is saying they have not enough moral fiber. They're not doing enough. They're not doing their part. I will tell you something. Unitarians, not Universalists, but Unitarians, were deeply connected with Puritans. And we come from a tradition that says the work ethic is the most important part of a moral character. Persistent gentleness reminds us that we can work, we can do, we can be open without fear of being called lazy or calling ourselves lazy, right? We want, in persistent gentleness, we exercise persistently that action of our soul calling us back to ourselves that John O'Donohue talked about. So that allows us to take care with our own mistakes and to take care with other people's mistakes. And persistently, we tell ourselves, I can do it. I can be gentle with myself. I can say from Thich Nhat Hanh, darling, I care about this suffering. Darling, I care about this suffering. I have had people I work with in spiritual direction or spiritual companionship, if you prefer, who when they do that exercise of laying their hand on their face and saying those words, immediately start to cry. True, compassionate gentleness has the power to move us to tears because we do it so little. And when I said before, we exercise returning. In much Buddhist meditation, they talk about how the goal is not to always have the blank mind, always be without thoughts, but to return, to exercise the muscle that says, no, no, come back to the breath, come back to the breath, come back to gentleness, be persistent, know you can do it. My wife, who, as you can tell, this is the second time I've mentioned her, I think is very wise. And she says we would all be much better off if we treated ourselves like cherished toddlers. Structure, enough rest, some of us even need naps on the regular potty breaks, like before we leave to go to church. Snacks available so we don't get unduly frustrated because we're hungry. Active playtime that allows us to be creative and experience that elusive flow state of concentration. And important work. You might be thinking, do toddlers have important work? I learned about the important work of young people from Montessori, where I watched my nephew organizing beans to help his mother, organizing them by color in different canisters. He had important work, right? And it was meaningful to him. And then, of course, lots and lots of love. Love at the center, like the new values that we have heard about so much of late in Unitarian Universalism. And also, you must be persistent with toddlers. They need to grow and rest and eat and go to the potty and have time to play. They need it, and so do I, and so do you. So gentleness comes with persistence then, having to learn it, to train in gentleness, to train with persistence and practice in order to bring it to the forefront of our being. You can't push the river. Even the training, the hope of healing, the persisting itself needs to be gentle. So I want to speak too about the cultural moment we're in right now. I know that many of us in our joys and sorrows could have brought deep, deep sorrow to what is happening in this country and all over the world. Persistence, it has always seemed to me, is found in the quotation from Frederick Douglass, reminding us power concedes nothing without a demand. Niceness does not get the job done, right? Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Sometimes we need to speak firmly, compassionately, lovingly, and make a demand. And that can be a really hard place, right, for gentle persistence, because in that case, we are being gentle with ourselves, with our rights, with our own joy, dignity, and liberation, as Adrienne Maree Brown says. So they do not argue for niceness, these words of Douglass, but they focus on what will move power and the persistence of that demand. So I want you to consider today that even if someone is not nice, they're probably trying their best, and with the tools that they have at that moment, and to offer them gentleness in return again and again. And to remember too that that person who is not showing care may be yourself. And to offer yourself gentleness again and again, persistently, is one way to reach healing and one way to be brave. Offering our hearts in gentleness is not easy. And I'm inviting you to do it again and again and again, not in the paradox of tolerance, right? Intolerance, that doesn't mean I have to tolerate intolerance. Someone else's right to their opinion ends right here. It ends at the boundary of my rights, the boundary of your rights. So, but I can still speak to people, even with a raised voice, while being gentle with myself. Don't leave yourself out of persistent gentleness. Don't think that being nice is the road to liberation, right? Nice is not the road to liberation. And so when people block the bridge and you're trying to drive across it, niceness is not the road to liberation. And being tender, being gentle with our own needs is sometimes inconvenient for ourselves and for others. And so we must be also gently persistent. Allow yourself to try and try again and try yet again. Blessed be, my friends.